Lance. Great to see
Hello.
you. Great to be with you. I'm really excited for this conversation. I feel like there are a number of people in the education and AI space who I admire and whose work I follow closely, and you're one of those. And I am just really excited to dive into the subject. There's no topic, I think, bigger within higher ed right now than AI. It's what people are talking about at conferences, at meetings, at faculty meetings, at any convening that I go to. This is on the lips of everyone. So I'd love to talk about that. First, I'd love to just get a sense of what's exciting you at the moment. What are you curious about at the moment? What are you reading at the moment?
Yeah.
Hey,
Gosh.
I already interrupt you already, but let's introduce ourselves first because I know some people may not know one or the other. So just introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I'm Lance Eaton, Senior Associate Director of AI and Teaching and Learning at Northeastern University. And then outside of that, I have my Substack and a range of work of talks, writings, workshops, programming that I've been doing around AI in education for the last 3 years. And that's just been part of my larger work of like really grappling in this intersection of like technology and education and the possibilities, but also the problems that it represents.
That's great. And where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up on the North Shore in Massachusetts and lived in the greater Boston area most of my life, and currently now reside just about 100 yards from the Providence, Rhode Island line in Cranston, Rhode Island.
Nice. That's great. I'm a Bostonian as well. I grew up in Boston, Brookline. So we share that
Yep.
in common. I write the Wonder Tools newsletter, and we both, I think, share this passion for finding ways to bridge the gaps that sometimes exist between education and technology and creative
Mm.
uses of technology by teachers for learning and help. We both, I think, are interested in helping teachers and helping other, people in general make creative use of tech. So I'd love to talk about some of what we're exploring and experimenting with these days.
Mm.
I wonder if you could walk through kind of your core toolkit. I think we all have a handful of tools that we kind of go to repeatedly for various different purposes. And I'd love to get a sense of what are some of those for you. What's on your laptop today and your phone today that you're using?
Yeah, I mean, the one I started to play with yesterday and doing my best not to go down the wormhole is Claude Cowork. Um, I finally got that up and started playing with it, and I'm like, all of those like that whole, and I know it can do much more than that, but right now the organization capabilities, like there's just so many things I'm like, go into that folder and like clean it up, and or the big thing for me is I download a lot of research, and being able to say, hey, here's a folder of all these downloaded articles, rename them according to the article title, and then sort them into like buckets of relevance. Uh,
Interesting.
that's the one like I'm totally nerding out. I probably move pretty consistently back and forth depending on the tasks from like Google Notebook LM, which I know like you're one of the earlier ones to turn me on to that, and like the more advanced features that it keeps coming out with. Your ChatGPT, your Claude, and Gemini, I kind of jump across those predominantly. Uh, Similarly, because of what's been now more possible, I find myself doing a bit of, dare I say, vibe coding, and I've built out a few programs that I'm like, this is how I want my program. So example, like I built an MP3 music player for my computer because it's like, these are the features I want. These are the things I don't want distractions. I can't stand the iTunes store, blah, blah, blah. So like I've been doing things like that. I created an RSS feed because like all of the ones I've seen out there, you either have to subscribe or, you know, it's unclear the sustainability of the programs, and there are certain things again I wanted in it. So I've done that. I've done now also one for podcasting. So like I've been playing around with how to make new tools, which is not a thing in my history I've done. Like I was playing around with HTML in the, in like the GeoCities days, for those that can remember back in the late
Right.
90s.
Flashing,
But
blinking.
that's about
Site.
right, causing seizures everywhere. But this is probably like this is the first time I've really felt like, oh, I can actually do more than I can actually build some stuff. And so I think those are the things. I've been leaning into. I mean, I use Notion for really organizing my notes.
Mhm.
It's still one of those tools that like I know I could get more out of it, and sometimes it's just overload to try to figure those things out. And so I've just I think there's probably three or four tools like that where I'm like, I know there's more power here, but I haven't been able to unlock it yet. And then there's other places where I'm like, I just want a very simplified tool that meets my exact needs and nothing more. So
Yeah,
those are the ways I've been playing around.
that's really cool. And what about the daily stuff, just like documents, teaching materials, slides, tasks, projects, the kind of core things that you're doing day in as just to get your work done?
In terms of like what tools or just what
Yeah.
that looks like.
Yeah, like do you have a kind of tool set that you use for tasks and for making slides or making videos? Because you do a lot of creative work in terms of making presentation, so forth.
Yeah, appreciate that. I mean, I think a few months ago, I would have said like I'm almost predominantly, or 4 months ago, I would have said I'm almost predominantly just starting in Google Slides. Um, I think I've been doing two things now pretty consistently, and one is uh, I created my own custom bot to act as a interviewer, particularly around talks.
Mhm.
And so I'm using it for like conversation to build out different talks and different workshops so that like it's digging into like what is it you're really trying to do and how do you want to say that and like what are the things you're not considering. So it's not there to make the talk, it's there to help me flesh out like what is it I want to cover in this one or what's distinct about this one. And then I have a lot of that text and I'll use the bot then to like take what I've said and start to shape it better again in conversation. So that's a workflow I've been really excited about because I've been a professional writer for over 20 years and I still get challenged by the blank page.
Yep.
So starting in dialogue is really powerful.
Is it a custom GPT, just to be specific, or a Claude
Yeah,
artifact?
yeah.
Or
Yeah, it's a custom GPT that I've built and I'll continue to tweak as I see different results. But its goal, in as a follow up, I can certainly share like its goal is to like push the conversation and to like ask a deeper question, and then it moves into another phase of like, all right, now that we've got everything, like how do you see this shaping? And like its intention is to not give me the answers, but to really like, is this what you're really trying to say?
that's great.
Um, so I usually start with that. That starts, that gets me pretty close to a decent script. And then I'm moving into Google Doc to like finesse it.
Mhm.
And at that point, I'm moving into Google Slides, but I'm also leaning on, I mean, I've tried the Gemini ability to create the slides.
Mhm.
It's still not there for, it's still not there for my vision or like how I think about the flow in the kind of rhythm of slides. But now that I have the text, then I can start plotting it out. And usually I'm working with Google Slides and they're just much better with their I don't like the I don't like the framing that like beautify this slide, which means that they have it on every slide. So I'm just like, there's some of my slides that don't need beautifying. Stop that. Google. Stop shaming me, Google. But I mean, I really do like that because it's again, I can click on it and it can give me a flavor and I can decide in that moment like it's not getting it, or maybe it helps me know like it helps me decide whether it is what I want or what it's not what I want. And that for me is a really, I think that's one of the better things we do. Some folks don't appreciate about it is like I don't want to treat it like an answering machine,
Mhm.
but it does give me something to work against, and
Yeah.
that's really helpful, right? Like it can be like, oh, like yes, it made it. I'm like, but that's not really my style.
Right.
Oh, I could be more tuned to like what it is I need or want in that moment.
Right. By reacting to something that's not working, you kind of identify, oh, yeah, actually, what I do need is a bold,
Yeah.
clear image of this. Here's what I want to do. And you kind of react to
Yeah.
create something better. Interestingly, just as an aside, I've been testing Keynote is now part of the new Apple Creative Studio that they've just started
Mm,
uh, rolling out as a subscription service. And Keynote now also does that, allows you to sort of beautify a slide. You can also create the slide from text, like just put in a
mm,
prompt and have it create slides, which works somewhat unevenly so far. But
yep.
beautifying the slide is kind of interesting because it'll say, hey, this should be a little
Mm,
bit larger. It'll just kind of give you a preview of what that would look like. And now PowerPoint, you can use Claude with PowerPoint too. So it's interesting how the slide kind of space is
Mm.
benefiting from AI, but not quite there yet, I think, as you pointed out. A lot of the default stuff that you generate, whether it's Gamma, Beautiful.ai, Canva, any of the tools that
Mhm.
now generate slides, to me, they're still, in many cases, generating kind of conventional bullet point style, typical
Mhm.
slides. There's one exception I found, which was when I used Gamma with Nano Banana Pro enabled. It's one of the sort of features.
Ooh.
It creates,
Yep.
sort of uses Gamma's intelligence in terms of structuring the slide deck, and
Mm.
but it uses the Nano Banana Pro to design actually more appealing visuals. So that was kind of a
Mm.
nice combination. But then, of course, you can't edit the individual slides in some cases if there's text
Yep.
that's rendered as images. So anyway, the space is still in development. And then just in terms of recording, because you record videos, do you have any
Mm.
tools for that, or do you just use kind of a simple workflow?
Uh, I that's where I am like I am at this point. I guess I would call it old school, like ScreenPal,
Mhm.
which used to be Screencast-O-Matic,
Right.
is my go-to because it's just. Um, I remember when I first came across it, and like I remember working with faculty, and like this is like the late 2000s, early 2010s, and like if you wanted them to do video and have some video editing abilities, like you had like Camtasia and like you had these things that I would describe are just tanks. Like you're inundated with choices. And like what we needed is a car. And I just remember using Screencast-O-Matic with somebody who was um, later in their career who didn't consider themselves tech savvy. And like the next day, she's sending me a like, I made a half-hour video doing blah blah blah, and I was just like, great, like because it's just that simple, and I'm good with that. So I largely have been doing that with a slide deck. Like I don't. I think that's another area where I'm like, I want to play around, and I've played a little bit with some of the like AI created video stuff.
Mhm.
Again, I there's a part of this, and I think I've seen this with educators, and I think this is something that's going to show up in this space as a whole. And in there's ways it already is like there's something about the imperfect human piece that might have more appeal. And even before AI, I remember working with faculty who were making videos, and they would get, rightfully so, they want it to be perfect. They want, they are professionals, and they want to present that. And I would encourage them, like, it's okay if you have a couple ums. Like you're human, and
Yeah,
especially if it's an asynchronous course, that comes across of
yeah.
if you're stumbling, if you're hesitating.
I think
Yeah.
if we look across other spaces, that really resonates. Like if we're talking about, my daughters are doing clay these days, so I'm thinking a lot about
Mm.
clay and making pottery. And you in many cases, you like to have a perfect plate that's manufactured in a factory and all that. If you're eating on it every day, but in some cases, you'd like to have a mug that's like handmade and has some flaws in it, or other decorative items, plant holders or whatever that are like not
Mm.
perfect. They're imperfect. Their
Yep.
imperfection is what makes them human and artistic. Same thing with clothing. Like my older
Mm.
daughter has been doing some of her own knitting and sewing and stuff like
Mm.
that. And she makes beautiful stuff, and it's not always perfect, right? She would say that, and I love it. I love wearing this scarf. It's like it's just personal and it's human and it's real and
Mm.
it's flawed in small ways, but I don't care. Like I don't need a manufactured thing in every case. And
Mm.
again, same thing in food. Like sometimes you want a packaged food, but sometimes you want just something that's like a little bit handmade and rough around the edges. I'd much rather have a brownie that's like human
Mm.
made, a little uneven and whatever, than like a factory stamped one. So I think there's a lot of
Mm.
things like that. Like I think, and just to bring it back to the tools discussion,
Mm.
testing a really interesting tool now called OK Human. I don't know if you've seen this.
Ooh.
Kind of
No.
a reverse of an image, sorry, of an AI checker. So it checks that you're human.
Mhm.
And
Uh,
basically it sits on your computer, and when you're typing, it's sort of you can stamp and saying like, it's a stamp that says, "I actually typed this," and it listens to the
mm.
microphone, but hears the typing, and it knows what human typing sounds like as compared with copy typing, right? Which is when you're
Yep.
just copying something from a screen, or when you're just copying and pasting something. So you can have a little stamp on your material. It says
Yep.
like, "Hey, I wrote this, and here's the verification. Here's how much time I spent on it. Here's the parts that I actually wrote, in case you do, bring in a quote or something from someone else." And you can put that on your piece if you want to, or you don't
Mhm.
have to. You can, keep it private, or you can make it public. And it's interesting to me that there's a necessity for that, right? But I think there is, as you're pointing out, like
Mhm.
there is kind of going to be. this need for people to say like, "Hey, I actually made this and it's not AI." You know, when I'm
Yep.
recording my audio for my newsletter, for my podcast, people often email and like, "What tool are you using? What clone is that?" I'm like, "No, no, that's actually me." And now I have to say that, like, I have to,
Right.
I think increasingly, I think that's gonna be the case, that we're gonna have to show that this is our work and even add flaws or leave
Right.
or leave it raw, you know, and that's, I think, what's gonna separate the people who have humanity in their work and those who kind of have, mass market kind of manufactured quality or characteristic to it.
Yeah, my mind goes in two places. I feel like that there's truth in that, and my mind immediately went to and how easy that will start to be gamed. Because like my mind went to like if I want to be a bad actor, I'm gonna hire somebody for like pennies on the dollar, a mechanical Turk, and tell them go open this program and type out this thing, right? Like that's my mind goes there because that's the world we live in. So there's that piece, and then it also reminded me of like I've had some of these really sweet, amusing conversations with faculty in the different talks where like there's this moment of like I have this and this realization of like or this longing. They're like I long for the days when the paper submitted had like grammatical errors and like they were off topic and they weren't these like 10-page like overly wordy complicated and like right like there's that interesting piece of like oh did we might not have realized how good we had it.
Right, 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 right. There's something nice and authentic about the pre-AI era, right? We're gonna look back,
Mm,
I think, with sentimentality and fondness for the
mm,
period of time in which we could look at something and say, "Wow, a human drew that. A human took that picture. That's an amazing animal doing something unusual that really happened. It's not bunnies
mm,
on a trampoline that were AI generated. It's actually." Or we don't even have that 10% wondering whether some of it was AI generated. This
mhm,
really did wear that clothing or really did say that thing or really did do that thing. It's an interesting kind of nostalgia I think we're going to have, and already we can see that.
mm.
I wanna shift gears because 'cause you've done some
Yeah.
amazing work, I think, that has been so valuable in terms of gathering statements about AI. We're talking about
Mm,
AI and verification, all that. Or, what have been a couple things that have either surprised you or maybe are counterintuitive about how faculty and teachers of various kinds are interacting with students with regard to AI. Like, there's, I think,
mm,
dozens, if not hundreds of statements that you've compiled, right? And you've done a lot of these conversations with different faculty members in all different domains, right? So what are a couple things that have surprised you or a couple of, like, counterintuitive or non-intuitive things that you've learned from that?
yeah. So the resource is this repository of AI syllabi statements. And yeah, there's probably at this point over 200 of them. And I just like right out of the gate in January 2023 I just started to do a call being like, you got an AI policy in your syllabus? Like share it, let other people see it, like help other people figure this out because we're all figuring it out and continuing to figure it out. So that's been really cool to just like see that. I think what I've been interested in is seeing some of the nuance, seeing some of the changes, particularly because when people submit that, there's a option of like, is this new or is this a revised? So like there's some interesting history to start to look at between like new ones that are the first time they've been entered versus the ones that like, here's what it looked like 2 years ago. Here's what it looks like today. Um,
By the way, I just wanna point people to,
yeah,
if you're interested in what
yeah,
I'm talking about right now, what we're talking about, which is syllabi policies, how are teachers, communicating with students about what AI use is
mm,
acceptable, et cetera. Lance has on his, Substack, which is AI plus education equals simplified, which is a great Substack if you're interested in any of these topics. He has a tab that says AI syllabi policies, and this is an open source kind of document that he's created, and I've recommended to numerous faculty who
mm,
are so desperate for a sense of what other people are doing. So you can see
mm.
that. So as we're talking, if you want to see that, you can go to his Substack and just click on the AI policies, and you can use that document. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you for the directing into that. So I mean, I think what's interesting to me is it's like everything everywhere all at once of on the one hand, like I've seen people from very early on tackle this head on, get into the trenches to start to figure it out, to start to play with it, to start to understand where it works and where it doesn't. Um, and like I do probably at this point between like probably about, somewhere between 30 to 50 talks, workshops a year. And I'm still getting requests from institutions for like the 101.
Mhm,
And I think what's interesting about that is like we're 3 years in, and this is the thing that worries me, is we're 3 years in, and I realize we're all at different places. We all have different relationships with AI, but AI itself has become ubiquitous, and the like we have students who have been graduating college now without any real significant or consistent or coherent like critical exploration of that.
mm,
And that critical exploration is both understanding all of the problems it represents, all of the problems it potentially has for us, and also exploring like the opportunities, the ways that it shows up in the real world, the way that it shows up in people's work. And so I think it still surprises me that that's still happening,
mm.
um, because it just there's a if there's been a long-term thread of like the irrelevance of higher education, and like this feeds that. Like this is one of those like perfect examples. Like I know there's nuanced deep conversations going on, and we still have many schools that haven't even figured out a policy or haven't figured out a way to think about how's it going to show up in their education. And that's the thing that like, ugh, like I worry about for higher education as a whole, given especially the last uh, 16 months and the ways it's been having to navigate a lot of political stuff, a lot of funding issues, and all of that.
What are a couple? I mean, obviously, it's a systemic problem. But what are two or three reasons from your perspective? Is it just institutional bureaucracy? Is it just status quo bias? Is it there's too many different kinds of technology that have happened over time that have burdened people?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, and I don't think it doesn't. I've been saying this from the beginning. I don't think it gets acknowledged enough. Is like this happened right on the heels of the like we were coming back to, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, like whatever a normal semester is from the pandemic, and it hit right then. And we don't remember that the pandemic, uh, every semester was for many faculty on many campuses. It was just like we have a new format for you. Like, first was we're switching to remote like mid semester. The next was we're going to be remote all semester for some.
Mhm.
Um, then we were in like these hybrid phases, and the hybrid phases kept changing. So like that's faculty having to like rethink, restructure all of their courses like repeatedly over several years,
And learn two
and then
new teaching modalities, right? Like learn to
right,
present yourself online, learn to figure out how to
yeah,
hybrid juggle someone in the room and online, like multiple different kinds of things, multiple different kinds
right.
of tools as well.
And the assumptions with that, right? Like the assumptions with that, just like with our students, is like you have a curate, like we're both in good situations where we can have a curated space where we can like do this work. But two thirds of faculty are adjuncts, and many of them are, a good portion of them, a good portion of many faculty are in like the assumptions about what they have for space in order to do synchronous. I think we don't understand that. So there's all of that happening. And then as things started to look like, oh, there might be a little stability here, AI comes, and like for 20 years we have been, or probably longer, working with faculty to say, you need that perfect alignment. You need your learning outcomes to align with your assessments, and your assessments to align with your learning materials.
Mhm,
And AI came and like one if you do that well, then your course is a deeply intricate web in which everything is related.
mhm,
But AI comes and like in some ways obliterates the way we do assessments, which means everything else also has to be changed.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's a lot. So like that's one piece. The other piece is like higher ed has just been taking a beating. Again, I'll speak particularly nationally in the United States, like it has been taking a beating politically. Uh, there was what was going on in 2024 in terms of presidents being hauled in front of Congress
Yeah.
in regardless of wherever anybody stands on that, like the implications, the fallout from that was felt. You have the Trump administration that came in, and it's like, I mean, in the first few weeks, at one point was like, there's no funding coming from. I, I forget which, like, for a very short period they had claimed they were shutting off like all sorts of funding,
Yeah.
and like those types of antics have continued for the last year and a half. And what and so if your leadership, like, you're constantly having to put out fires that are like the house is burning down, or like our students are being harmed. So
Yeah.
there's a real struggle for leadership to keep a focus on it. And then there's just the, like, this is a costly this is a costly social technology that requires figuring out what does it mean for learning. If we can figure out what it means for learning, what is it like? How do we then move forward? Because you can have a policy, and that's important, but if you don't have a tool, it doesn't really matter, right? Like if you're saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it. If you don't have a tool, then everybody's trying to use their own, and like that's an introduction of all sorts of inequities of the person who's using like the frontier high paid model, and the student who gets like a limited amount on like the free version. So I think like it is a wicked problem. I think at the end of the day, I just I think I just still get worried of there's a good amount of people who are saying that from the beginning, and there's still institutions and universities that haven't like recognized that.
Yeah. The other major issue at the moment, obviously, is the economic, right, challenges that
Right.
universities are facing, right? Many colleges have closed,
Mhm.
having to scale back, to cut back budgets, et cetera, and that's happening even as, students are expecting different things, right? Because they can learn so much online,
Mm.
they can learn in different ways, and they're preparing for careers that are different, and there are 30% fewer people being hired into entry-level jobs in many,
Mhm.
industries, according to recent research. So the need to train people differently to prepare them for the changing marketplace is also shifting. So there's a sort of massive perfect storm of all of these
Mm.
factors leading to it being a wicked problem as you described. So, so solve
Mm.
it for us in three quick steps. What are like a couple of specific things? So if I'm a university person sitting in university, I happen to be at City University of New York, right? Another big institution in New York, not too far from you in Boston. What are a couple things that you're advising people in these important seats, right, who are having to determine the path forward for AI for their schools, right, or their attitudes or
Mhm.
approaches or policies? Like, what are a couple of key things you're talking about?
Yeah, in I think, I mean, the one is making sure it's on like senior leadership's attention, it like regularly. Like it doesn't have. I've said this elsewhere of like it doesn't have to have the whole pie, but it really does need some of the pie of their time and their attention and their strategizing. They need to like that needs to happen. That there needs to be coming leadership vision from the top. That's also recognizing on every campus, there's a lot that's probably already been done, but it's all in these little pockets. And so, what are all of those lessons that are being learned about how it can be used? In trying to meet somewhere in the middle of how do we keep supporting that? How do we keep growing that? How do we bring in, uh, how do we plan for it? Because I think that's the other thing is there's the like we've got to figure it out now, and that's true. And there's a way we can look at this to think about it much like we thought about uh, internet infrastructure within our colleges and universities. Like there was a time when that didn't happen, and in most universities it didn't happen overnight, and it was a deeply costly, expensive thing. And so they said, okay, we have to start to budget for it.
Mhm.
It also reminds me of like uh, Microsoft Office. Like there was a point in which institutions, because of the way those service models were like, oh, we're not going to be able to afford Microsoft Office for everybody. And now everybody has access to it. If not Microsoft Office, then Google Docs. And so much of that was like moving to a subscription model, but also like the prices adjusting. And I think that's also what we have to look for, advocate, and anticipate is like, let's move towards that, knowing that it's not going to happen today, but we've got to carve that out as a priority and look at what do we get with AI that then means we don't have to do subscribe to this service or that service, or like where's some of the trade-offs there. So there's like that planning piece, there's the leadership piece, and then there's the like recognizing and like surfacing what's already happening is just like it's a really good place to start at this point if there hasn't been a lot of action happening.
One quick memory that you just jogged for me is I used to work way back when at a magazine which is defunct called Yahoo Internet Life magazine.
Oh.
So this was back in the early 2000s, actually the turn of the
Hmm.
millennium, I guess. And the magazine had a section, a special feature called Most Wired Colleges. It was an effort
Mm.
by the editorial team to basically kind of have an alternative, a digital alternative to the best colleges, U.S. News and World Report. So we would go and look at different colleges and how wired they were. Could you get access to the internet in your dorm room? Did classrooms have internet access? How fast
Right.
was the internet access? Like this was not something that was universal at the time, as you pointed out, and it's something that separated schools. And I think we're in a similar position now, in some sense, with AI, where at some schools
Mm.
it's really there's a lot of thinking happening, and other places there's
Hmm.
less. So I wonder if we
Yeah.
can move towards the teachers, the individual level, um, and maybe we can do a little back and forth, and together share like 10 things that teachers.
Mm.
So if I'm a teacher, and a lot of people I consider to be teachers, even if they're not like in a formal teaching role, like they're leading a team, they're coaching other people, they're leading
Hmm.
workshops periodically or whatever. So let's see if we can just um, rattle off 10 ways in which teachers. We can talk more about the AI reasons to be cautious, but let's like talk
Yeah.
about practical use cases, right? Like, so what are
Yeah.
10 ways teachers can and should be considering using AI to either reduce their, burden of technical work,
Mm.
to increase their sensibilities, like whatever purposes it might be beneficial. Like, maybe we can
Mm.
go back and forth and see if we
Sure.
can come up with 10 quick ones.
Sure. I mean, I'll start. The one I always go to that I think faculty don't appreciate enough or haven't tried yet and see some of its benefits is working with students to go to use AI not as an answering machine, but as a interviewer. In particular, going to AI to help students do reflection. That reflection is this practice, right? And it's a phenomenal practice within teaching and learning. It's really powerful. Like, and it's also a practice. And a lot of people who are earlier in that practice, like they don't know what to ask themselves in order to like push their thinking forward as a reflection. And so, like we've all those of us that do reflection, like we've all had that student, many students who like you ask them to reflect on something and like they're like, I didn't like it. And they write a paragraph that's like 500 words of I didn't like it. And imagine the intervention of doing your reflection with an AI with an appropriate prompt or a customized chatbot that when you say I didn't like it, it starts to probe. It starts to ask those deeper questions. The student is reflecting in this like one person dialogue with the AI. And it does two things there. First of all, the blank white screen still gets us. The dialogue allows them to feel like more direction or help them figure out direction. And then the questions that the AI like ask help them, like it demonstrates to them like, oh, these might be the things I ask myself when I'm trying to like reflect on something, or just that as a pattern of thinking about things. So that's my one is reflection.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Sparking more student reflection, and on a macro and micro level has benefits, right? The micro level is on this occasion, the piece of writing about a book or whatever material goes from I didn't like it to like here's some observations I have about ways in which it surprised me or disappointed me, and the language and the topic and the sentiment, et cetera. And the macro lesson I'm taking from that, from your point, is that this also helps with the skill, right? The skill,
Hmm.
meta skill of kind of understanding what reflection is and how to do it. And maybe next time I can do some of that myself, right? Without
Hmm.
the AI's assistance. So that's number one. That's a great one. Number two for me is for us as instructors, as faculty, syllabus. So
Hmm.
the syllabus to me is one document that most of us. I'm going to generalize here because I'm sure some phenomenal syllabi out there that are just really gorgeous and meaningful and engaging and inclusive and have all of the great characteristics of a great syllabi, great syllabus. But in my experience, seeing a lot of syllabi at various different schools and various different kinds of classes at various different levels of education, they often leave something to be desired. They're either dull, They're not complete. They don't answer the questions students have. They're visually dull. They may be confusing and using technical language. They may not answer questions about students have about how they're going to be graded or what the expectations are, or what the assignments are, or what's interesting, or why should I care about this course,
Mm,
right? A lot of syllabi I've seen are just kind of very meat and potatoes. Um,
mm,
but like the student coming to the subject for the first time might be like, why am I taking this subject? Like, what is the point of this? How does this fit into my life? Or
yeah.
why should I care? Or how does this matter to me? Or how does this fit into what else I've been learning? So it's hard to go from that current state to something that's really, really engaging and really successful and really um, inclusive and has all of the great characteristics while we're as professors and teachers doing so many other things, right? So an AI system
Mhm,
can help walk us through that, right? We can give
mm,
an AI tool an opportunity to critique us, right? To say like, hey, these are
mhm,
things that make this syllabus less inclusive than it can be, right? Your language is a little bit less inclusive than it could be. Some of this material that you're describing um, could be explained a little bit more clearly, right? You can answer these common
mhm.
questions that students have. In fact, how about putting an FAQ section that
Yeah.
answers some of the questions in a way that would be relatable to students? And how about including this other section that you didn't include at all, and how about answering a few questions now to clarify for yourself what the objectives are, the learning outcomes you have in mind for this assignment are, and how you're going to actually grade it, and all of those kinds of things that the AI assistant can really give you a lot of feedback on and critique you on and challenge you on in a way that if you have a great colleague, they could do that potentially. But in
Mm,
many of our cases, we don't always have colleagues at our side who can critique everything we're doing. And so this is an objective, independent, instant, constructive way to critique and therefore improve your material to better serve your students, right? And
mm,
it's not writing the syllabus for you. I think we both share that
yeah,
perspective. It's definitely not doing that for you. It's instead critiquing you so you can be better yourself. You can be your fullest
mhm,
self, even though you may not have 10 hours to do this from scratch or to hire a professional person to help you with it. So that's my number two.
mm. I don't know if this is number 3 or like 2A, but to that, I would add, another layer is the having AI helping you with the visual layout. Because
Yeah.
there's the content, right? There's content in this presentation, and that leads me into really kind of 3, which is the like turning that to a graphic syllabus. So there's this great book called the graphic syllabus by, I want to say, Kate Nilsson. Came out, I don't know, late 2000s, early 2010s, and it's about like how do you do that now. Like one of the courses I teach is comics, so it's like perfect, but over the years I've just really thought about like how do we make this a reading experience. And Eric Curtis, who I think does Control Alt Curriculum. He has a really good newsletter, and probably about 2 months ago, he was making small using the new Nano Banana and I think Notebook LM. He was making graphic novels,
Mm.
like or comics, right? He was making these like 16 to 20 page comics, and like in my mind, like next time I'm doing a class, like that's what I want to use that to build out the syllabus to then be able to like have this really visual, interesting thing that I'll also be able to with AI just have better alt text for to
Yeah.
make sure that is accessible as well.
Yeah.
So I guess I would call I feel like that's 3.
That's great. That's great. So far we have reflection, right? Helping spark student
Mm,
reflection. Two
yeah.
is helping strengthen our syllabi by giving us critique of that. And three is like making our materials more visual, particularly like a syllabi, making it more like a graphic.
Mm,
By the way, just a quick aside, Nano Banana Pro, I found, and ChatGPT actually can do this well now too with its better image generation capabilities. You can give it a simple two-part panel. I find these to be really simple,
mm,
great. So for example, like what it was like when we first got email. It shows
yeah.
a person in a chair just like excited. My younger daughter just got her first email account. She's like, "It's so fun getting email." And I'm like, "Wait,
Aw,
didn't want
so precious.
it as fun anymore." And she looked over my shoulder. She's like, "Dad, you have so much email. It's great." I'm like, "It's not that fun." Um, But you could show that in one panel. First panel is like, hey, the moment 20 years ago when email first came out, whatever. The second panel is like the flood of email envelopes like overwhelming someone, right? And just the before and after. And there's so many before and afters, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
do that. You can create those, and that's an image you have as an educator or as a person
Mm-hmm.
that for me, like I can't draw at all
Yeah.
in a
Yep.
recognizable way. So that's allows me to sort of develop that. Okay, so my fourth one, so fourth tip for faculty to people teaching, et cetera, ways to use AI would be on the level of the lesson plan.
Mm-hmm.
So the macro is the syllabus, the whole course, but where the rubber meets the road is what's happening in a particular class. We have an hour today, we have 3 hours today. You and I are in a classroom together. I'm the teacher, you're the teacher, whatever. We're in the space for learning and teaching. This is a sacred space. This is a valuable space. We have 15 or 14 or whatever number of sessions together in this semester, and then you're going to be out in the world, and that may be the last time we have the opportunity to be in this learning experience together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to design that so that it maximizes the experience. It optimizes our time together. It capitalizes on this sacred thing that we have, this opportunity we have to be in this learning relationship in a way. And so I can come up with some ideas myself, but I'm limited by my human experience, by my human brain, by my biases, by my limitations in terms of what I know or what I can think about, or my pedagogical savvy. And what the AI assistant can help me with is expanding, just as a crane, right, can help me reach higher in the top of the classroom to fix a light or something I couldn't fix with my own limited human hands. I can use the AI to say, like, hey, this is what we want to do. We're working on public speaking today, let's say in class, as a skill, as a workshop for this entrepreneurial class, whatever it might be. And, I've had students do these 2-minute speeches and then give each other feedback, and it's fine. But what else could I do? Like, I want them to practice. I want them to get experience, giving feedback and learning what good feedback means. We've got an hour. We've got 15 students. Here are the criteria. Here are the constraints. Here's the
Mm-hmm.
learning objectives. Like, give me 10 different little games we could play for 10 minutes at the beginning and 10-minute reflective exercises we could do at the end, so that I can make this lesson even more strong and I can close it up nicely and I can get it off to a great start. And what I find in my own experience is that I get better ideas, right,
Mm-hmm.
than if I'm just working alone. And that's the honest
Yeah.
truth. People often are people who are critical of AI, and there are many reasons one can be and should be, but sometimes a criticism I hear is that, well, the ideas are mediocre or the output is mediocre. And I actually, in my experience, is quite different. Is that if the prompt is really detailed and I provide the right constraints and the right examples and the right background, et cetera, the ideas are plentiful, and that volume begets quality, right? Like if there's 10 different little exercises I could do, or 10 different ways I could frame this closing activity, this reflective closing activity, or this warm up game or exercise,
Mm-hmm.
I can pick 2 that are really interesting, right? Or 3 or 4 and then
Mm-hmm.
combine them or pick elements of them or, like, winnow out the ones that aren't quite as good or don't quite fit for this occasion. And invariably, I end up at a better place than if I were just thinking alone with my limited human brain. So that's my argument for using AI as an assistant to strengthen lesson planning ideas. And again, not replacing my own thinking, but augmenting it, extending it, stretching
Mm-hmm.
past my biases and limitations. What's your
Mm-hmm.
to that, or what's your thought? Or
I mean, I love that. I think that that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's I again. I think this is I was we. I think we're there. There's a portion of the discourse that's stuck in the trap, and I understand why, of just looking at AI through a deficit lens. Like, there's a lot to be critical about, but I think being trapped in that means, and what I see is a lot of people immediately associating it with cheating, immediately associating it with those negative things. And I'm not saying we can't, I'm not saying to ignore those things, but we miss these types of opportunities where I do think like, it's always like, I'm not always going to have another human around me. And like, I am regularly in collaboration with many amazing people. And sometimes I'm stuck on things. And this is something that, like, this is a thing that can help me get unstuck. Um, I will move on to, I guess this is 4 or 5.
this is 5.
This is 5. So my fifth is, and this is for people that are uncertain, for people that are critical. it's a hard thing to hear, but I think it's incredibly important for educators to play with AI and play with it until it does something that surprises you, that excites you, that you're like, I could use that. And I'm not saying you then have to use that, but I think there's an importance of understanding for some people the ways this meaningfully unlocks different ways of existing or different things that they feel more empowered to do. And I don't think we're going to be able to connect with students as effectively if we can't understand, like deeply understand, like for some of them, this is really powerful. Like I think, some of the students I've talked with and seen, like students who are navigating English as a second language, or um, ADHD, or dyslexia. Like there's ways that these tools are like unlock things, and are just to me, it's the like really play with it until you can like understand on a deep level, not just the problems, but the ways that it like for some people it just feels powerful or helps them in real ways, not in to bypass things, but to be able to better work with things.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. So experiment to find surprising areas and ways in which it can be helpful to you as a teacher in serving students. So we've got
Mm,
so far, we've got the reflection, sparking reflection among students. We've got syllabus, improve syllabi by kind of getting critiques that are helpful and constructive and specific. Three, adding visuals to syllabi, doing graphic kind of syllabi, doing other kinds of visuals that engage people. For lesson planning, like make the individual sessions that we're doing more engaging, more lively, more useful, more relevant, more inclusive, etc. Five, like using AI to surprise us, to like give us ways of serving students in ways that we might not have fully thought of. Six, I'm going to go to the kind of in breaking it down. I went from syllabus to lesson plan. I'm going to go to the individual pieces, the little building blocks
mm,
of an activity that could mean
mm,
helping me create a case study, like to use as an example, so I can have students role play, or helping me come up with a really good analogy for some complicated
mhm,
concept that we're talking about in the realm of entrepreneurial journalism or whatever it might be,
mm,
helping me come up with a few historical anecdotes that I can draw on. Of course, ensuring that those are accurate. So I have to do the work of the validation and verification, but it can help me. And sometimes, by the way, this is an internal search, not an external
mm,
search. So, brief digression just to clarify what I mean by that. Sometimes I'm looking out in Perplexity or Google or whatever your tool of choice is, right? Or Consensus if you're looking in the literature of kind of peer reviewed publications. But in many cases, the search you want to do is your own notes. So that's external search, right? But the
mhm,
internal search for me is often really valuable because I have tons of documents and notes and past examples and lesson plans. I just can't remember all of it now at this point. I'm getting old.
mhm,
I can't remember what we did. 3 years ago, we had a good session and we used this example and I brought up this anecdote and I referenced it in one of my slides, but now I can't remember the details of that anecdote. So now I
mm,
could go into Notebook LM, let's say. I use another tool
mhm,
called lazy.so, similar kind of personal knowledge management tools. People have their own preference, whatever your tool of choice might be, you can now kind of query that and say like, "Hey,
mm,
I'm working on this session. I want to tell an anecdote about how this previous era relates to the current era." For example, like the car, cars used to have levers before they had steering
mm,
wheels. Who would have thought,
yep,
right? And, just like now, we don't have necessarily the final interface for AI. Maybe I want a historical anecdote to convey that. So I can pull up
mm,
and find that. And again, the goal is of using AI in this context, strengthening the engagement, the learning experience,
mhm,
to improve the quality of learning, to help us reach our learning outcome. It's not a tool for tool's sake. It's not for whiz bang special effects. It's so
mm,
that the quality of the teaching experience is better. We are closer to the learning outcome. We have more enjoyment and joy and fun in the classroom. It's also reducing the burden for me. So instead of spending an hour trying to look at this one anecdote and banging my head against the wall, because like, where is it? When did I put that? The AI assistant can say, "Oh yeah, you actually did this. Here's what the anecdote was." And I can say, "Oh yeah, that's right. That's what I want to use."
mm.
So AI assistants can help us at that micro level of like strengthening the bits and pieces, the blocks that make up our teaching.
Yeah. My addendum to that is another way is within that is um, developing bad examples,
Yes.
and like we it is a time honored tradition for us to ask our students, like, I really loved your piece. Can I use it as an example next time around? We're never ever going to, nor should we ask a student like, this was a really horrible thing. Can I use it as a bad example going forward? But like bad examples are as good as good examples in terms of like what students can glean and understand like where they're aspiring to. So I wanted to throw in that as another like curated piece. I think the another way that I mean I see this is information, and I say it's information because it isn't universal yet. But I know ChatGPT has it. I believe Boodlebox has it where you can bring another person into the chat.
Mm,
Um, and so you and I can be on a single thread with an AI. And I just think about like, hot damn, like we're at a point where what happens when the you can have the AI essentially be the dungeon master and have two, three, four students in conversation with each other and interacting with like dungeon master for whatever scenario the course is running, then like there's like it's personalized or it's like responsive to what they're doing and they're getting the social piece of it, right? They're getting a bit, they're in the chat with other people and that creates again a little bit more community. It helps us hold on to the thing that we're concerned about with AI. So I think we're on the precipice of some of the social pieces of AI in the classroom that I think could be really valuable for learning and interacting and for the instructor to be able to like see that and engage with that.
that's great. Yeah, so we're getting close to our 10, our
Right.
we're also getting to the top of the hour. So let's see if we can do a quick lightning round for the
Yeah.
last couple. So um, I think there are many ways in which our students are living complicated lives and they're coming in with accessibility needs. They're coming in with many different diverse backgrounds. And for some of us, having some assistance and checking our own biases or our own
Mhm.
blind spots can be super
Mhm.
helpful in various different ways. In terms of the syllabus, for example, in terms of a lesson plan, in terms of a presentation we're giving, maybe in terms of instructions we're providing, right? So, in other words, maybe we need sometimes to scaffold the instructions or break the instructions down. I often
Mhm.
have the challenge, as someone who's taught a subject for a long time, I will sometimes bake in some assumptions. Oh, you know how to do the creative presentation. You know how to create slides. You know how to do this. You know
Mhm.
how to, package it up and put it into a PDF. Like there's certain things that I just assume sometimes, and then once in a while,
Mhm.
I need an outside view to say, like, actually, you might want to explain how to do that step. Or you might want to break that part down and explain how someone could do some of it in advance. And so they wouldn't have to wait till the last minute, given that
Mhm.
they, need that guidance or assistance. So basically using an AI assistant to help identify blind spots, implicit or explicit biases that I may have, help me be more inclusive or more make sure my materials are accessible. You mentioned alt text as an example. That's something
Mhm.
I only learned about in recent years. That was a blind spot
Mhm.
for me in like terms of my materials having alt text, so people using a screen reader could actually view that. And I'm sure there are other ways in which my materials in some cases aren't always accessible. And so I need to keep learning about that. And again, I don't have necessarily a colleague at my side all the time to say, like, hey, you might want to think about that. But the AI assistant can sometimes point those things out and
Mhm.
and point me in a direction of, oh yeah, look into this if you want to learn more about that or fix that.
Yep. Uh, I will add, and this is, I want to put caveats around this, like specific context when you are working with a safe environment, meaning it's protected, private, privacy is secured, is using student feedback to get a global understanding and consideration. So, we often get that at the end of the semester. We may, as a practice for me, I'm usually trying to ask it like every quarter of a course, um, and letting people know, like I'll de-anonymize it, and also I'm using a institutional tool that has been okayed for and all of that, but using that to just like what's going on here, and here's my course, like what are some things that I'm not seeing, or what are some assumptions I'm making or missing? What are some ways I might, redirect the course or figure out how to move forward from it? Just kind of getting that global insight and starting to again, don't have to do everything it says, but it does help me to kind of like look across that data.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really great tip. And by the way, that applies to anyone who's not teaching at all, but
Yeah.
using forms
Fair.
in any way, surveys in any way, right? You
Yep.
strip out names, you strip out emails, any private information you strip out. And then you
Mm.
say like, hey, there's 100 different comments here. They're open-ended that are complicated and nuanced. And my brain is limited and I could score them spending 3 hours and try to categorize them. But this is something a language engine is really good at. Put these into different categories, pull out some of the threads and themes and give me some guidance around what people are really telling me so I can act on it, right? Which is the ultimate
Mm.
purpose. And then I can spend the extra hour that I would have spent figuring out the thing actually talking to a couple students, right? Or being human with actual people. The last one, I think we're at 10. And then I'll just
Yeah.
run down the end and then maybe just last words as we get ready to conclude. For me, the last one is a simple one, which is maybe obvious for many people, but I still think there are a lot of people who aren't doing this, which is helping me remember what I actually say and what people say to me in meetings and in
Mm.
different settings that I'm in. Because I have
Mm.
this tendency, I'm sure other people may have it as well, some people, which is that I get really interested in something and I'm really excited about something, but then I can't remember the details of it or the examples or the
Mhm.
specifics of it. And yes, I take notes, but if I take notes with an aim to remember everything, I'm often half present and half not present. If I know
Mm.
AI note taker is assisting me with not just summarizing, but giving me a full transcript with the permission of, of people I'm with, right? Of course, if people are uncomfortable with that, there's no need to do that. But most people in my experience are okay with it because they can benefit from it as well. And so with student meetings, I go from the situation where a student emails me a couple days later and is like, what were you saying again about how I should handle this? Or, just kind of forgets entirely. And then we as instructors have to do the work of like fixing that and remembering that and sharing that. Now we have a shared record, right? Here's the things we agreed to. Here's the things that I suggested.
Mhm.
And I also have that now a backlog of that, which I can search.
Mhm.
I use a tool and recommend a tool called Granola, which
Mm.
allows me to package them up into different folders and bundles and search across those and ask all sorts of queries afterwards about those. It's very accurate,
Mm.
very well. It's very reliable. It works on my phone. So if I'm meeting with
Mm.
a person
Yeah.
and we want to have that record, it works there. So that's my recommendation. There are a lot of other tools and free tools that do that. Mac Whisper, the example of one you can use completely for free. They're that are secure, that are private, etc. But that to me has been a huge change in terms of having
Mm.
comfort of being able to focus fully on the conversation and also to share a summary, look back on it, reflect on it later.
Nice.
Final thoughts. We're at top of the hour, and I know you have to get
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yeah. No, I mean, final thoughts is like, this is, eh, I know this is incredibly hard for everybody in education. And like, so much of what we tell our students is the thing that we need here, which is like a bit, Anne Lamont's bird by bird. Like, we have to we have to try not to be overwhelmed because there's so much AI, there's so much AI hype, there's so many things, and try things and figure out like the term I keep going to is like we need to be critically engaged with this because we do have to figure out it is here, it is ubiquitous, and I want students to succeed and I want them to look at these tools thoughtfully. And the only way we do that is like if we do that as well with them. So
Thank you for that. I'm going to recap the 10 because I know some people may not have gotten all these 10.
yeah,
The first was a reflection you said about sparking reflection,
yeah,
right? Helping students to reflect more fully and having the AI assistant kind of help with that in an initial instance. I talked about syllabi and how we can use AI for critical input on our syllabi to strengthen what we're giving students, summarizing what a course is about and what their expectations are. You talked about visuals in terms of syllabi and generally how we can create really engaging visuals, right? People engage with things in
mhm,
a visual way, and we often, if we're old fashioned, are using text too much in a lot of our documentation materials. Lesson planning is something I talked about as point number 4, how we can use it to strengthen individual lessons. You talked about experimentation and using AI in creative new ways and challenging ourselves to surprise ourselves with new things we could do and serve students in new ways. I talked about building blocks, whether for case studies or examples or anecdotes. You talked about bad examples, right? And using AI to help us create these inoffensive and like fair to students examples of things that they can avoid. Here's an example of a ad hominem argument, right? So that you know what it
yeah,
looks like, and here's what it might look like if you framed it differently. And we can
mhm,
generate, all different categories of those really, really efficiently. Making our own examples often is very time consuming. right? For us as
Mm,
teachers, our time is a valuable constraint. Group chat you mentioned, which is really interesting. Like maybe we can have AI kind of help us in interesting new ways to be in dialogue with one another in creative and interesting ways. That probably we'll need to pull that thread further in some other context.
mm,
Accessibility, we talked about accessibility and blind spots and using AI to kind of identify these things. You mentioned feedback, which is so important, and how we can act on it more effectively if
mm,
AI assistant helps us understand what's actually in that feedback, with a caveat being, we're anonymizing it, et cetera. And then meetings is something for me. It's just like the day-to-day bread and butter is like, I can
mm,
actually remember what we talked about today now because I can go back later and review it even a month later or a year later, which is gonna be when it's
mm.
really, really valuable. So those are 10 specific examples. For those who are wondering, like, this are
Yeah.
specific examples for educators. It's not this theoretical, imagined, abstract kind of thing. It's something
Mm,
real tangible, and it can make a tangible impact on our roles and our jobs. And I would say this is true in a lot of different fields. Like we've been talking about
yeah.
teaching, but a lot of these things apply in a range of different fields. And I think what's valuable in the conversation these days, and you talked about how we're 3 years in, right? Earlier, you said,
Mm,
I think what's valuable 3 years in is to get into these nuances, to get into these
mhm.
detailed use cases, and to get into the limitations and the constraints and the ethical concerns that people have, and to move the conversation to that grounded like specificity level, as
Yep.
opposed to the extremist kind of conversation that still sometimes happens, which is,
Mm,
in my view, kind of a little bit less fruitful. So
yeah.
thank you so much. I have really enjoyed getting a chance to learn from you, to speak to you. I'd love to collaborate with you more in the future. And thank you for bringing together all of these materials that you share. For again, for people who haven't seen AI in Education Simplified, Lance's Substack, there's a great tab for prompts. You can get really
Mm,
specific ideas for prompts. There's the still open syllabi collection. You have other materials. You've generally been so generous in terms of sharing your materials, which I really appreciate. And I know a lot of educators appreciate, because many educators don't know where to turn to, and you give them a
well,
place to look for that.
mhm.
So I really appreciate that, and I'm excited to continue learning from you and to see you as like a parallel person working in this field, that I can look to for inspiration as well. So and
Mm,
if people haven't seen our sites, I guess they're linked here, Wonder Tools and AI plus Education Simplified. And I don't know if do you have time for questions? We don't seem to have many questions on these Substack lives, so maybe.
yeah, I can for probably, like, if we've got 1 or 2, I probably
Okay.
can.
So
And just
if someone has a question, if you've listened to some of this and you have a question or you have a comment you want to add, I know the Substack Live is not like necessarily the best for the interface for adding comments or questions. But if you do have something, um, I see a comment from Josh about loving the idea about visualizations to make topics come alive, and
mm,
mentions teaching.aiprototypes.org as a
mm.
resource. Thanks for that, Josh.
Oh,
And
Josh Gray. I'm a fan of his work as well.
Tom mentions Dr. Philippa Hardman, who's great, who authors a great newsletter on bridging the divide between instructional
Yep.
design possibilities with AI and actual practical implementation. That's at
Mm.
Dr. Philippa Hardman. You can search that on Substack. That is a great resource as well. Ethan Mollick's another one. One useful
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Stuart Wharton,
Yep.
who many people may know. If not, check out his book Co-Intelligence, where he talks about how quickly things are moving and gives a lot of good insight for those of us who are still exploring and developing our understanding of. And I don't see any other questions, so we'll wrap there. Thanks so much, Lance, and let's continue the dialogue in future occasions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Really a pleasure, and thank you. Yeah. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.